So let's take another topic, all in this idea of questioning reality, the 3-generation rule. This is a powerful, powerful thing. It's actually used, now I call it the 3-generation rule. I don't know if there's actually a historical term or psychological term or anything like that. It's just it was explained to me through reading, through spiritual guidance and experience and that sort of thing. So I call it the 3-generation rule. If somebody else has another name for it, feel free to drop that in the comments. And I can always include that in future so that more people understand this a little more. But it's really easy to understand. A 3-generation rule is a very powerful line of questioning that if you look at most families have 3 generations of living people within them. At least 3 generations, most families. When you look at a family dynamic and a group of parents gets together and they have kids, the parents tell their stories, their life stories to the kids. The kids experience some of that. But if the parents got together when, let's say they're 30 years old, we'll just use that as a number. Let's say they're 30 years old. The kids did not experience anything before the time those parents were 30 years old. So if those parents went through hell and back, the kids did not experience that. If their life is now love and light, flowers, parties, dancing, happiness, the kids experience the dancing happiness part. The stories of the parents at 30 years old as the kids grow become stories. As the kids grow, when they're 10, the parents are 40 in their stories of what mom and dad went through. When the kids are 20, the parents are 50. And the kids know that these stories of their parents, yeah, these horrible things happened to them, but we didn't experience it. We don't know what happened. We don't know the truth of it. Mom and dad talk about it every once in a while, but we don't know the truth. So then those kids become 30. And when those kids are 30, their parents are 60 and they're now grandparents because those kids are having children. So as those grandchildren grow up, you've got 3 generations. You've got 0-point babies, you've got 30 years old, the children, and you've got 60 years old, the grandparents. Grandma and grandpa are telling stories every once in a while about these horrible things they went through. Mom and dad say, yeah, they're just stories. And when those babies are 10 years old and asking questions, the grandparents are 70. When they're 20 and can truly ask the questions that have meaning, that they have enough life experience behind them to really ask the grandparents questions about their stories. Their grandparents are 80. Their parents are 50. Their parents are saying, well, grandma and grandpa are just telling stories sometimes. We don't, that's what they say. That's what they've been through. We're not dismissing it. But that's not what reality is. Our reality is dancing, happy, singing, all that, because that's what the parents knew. That's what the grandkids know. The grandkids didn't know about the other stuff. So the grandkids grow up knowing that these stories are passed down, but there's no knowledge of it. There's no experience of it to have knowledge of what the grandparents went through. What did the grandparents go through? I'm getting at that. So there's no knowledge of this. And then the kids grow up, they're 20, the grandparents are 80. They're 30, the grandparents are 90. Most likely in this day and age, not many people make it that long. It's something we're shifting with vibration, with diet, with healing and those sorts of things, that we will live longer. But a lot of people that I know, they make it into their 70s, and then after about 75, things start teetering off because of the system of health that we have. And like I said, the hope is that changes, that we do live a lot longer. But after 75, that's where people start falling off and transitioning to the other realms, so to speak. So chances are that by the time the kids are 20, they've probably lost one or multiple grandparents. By the time they're 30, there's a good chance they have very few left. And the stories really become just stories, because once the grandparent dies, the story dies with it. Think about that for a second. Once you die, your stories die with you because nobody else experienced them. So your stories die with you when you die, unless you're spiritually connected and can talk to each other. And that's a different subject altogether, one that we're going to hopefully get people connected to guides and ancestors and stuff to talk about those stories. But in this reality, in this physical world where we depend on physicality and the existence of humans to be alive to tell stories, when the grandparent dies, the story dies with it. So what if you really had questions about it? What if your parents told you, and there are parents like this who dismiss the stories of their parents, who dismiss the grandparents as, oh, those are just stories. Grandma and grandpa are just talking. And they program you to think those stories weren't real. They program you to think that they're exaggerating, that they're not telling the truth, that they're just stories. They can program you out of believing the reality that the grandparents went through. Why do I talk about this? One of the first rules in dictatorship, and this is just the rules in my mind. I've read a lot about dictators and different people over the years. I always had a fascination with Hitler. I could never understand why somebody could be so malevolent. I always had a fascination with his story, fascination with other stories. I've read about stories of people coming out of North Korea, stories of these other places. One of the things that I find as a commonality is they learn that you don't have to control the population right away. What you have to be willing to do is wait and be patient for those who experienced to die off. The grandparents went through World War II. You don't have to do something right away to get the desired outcome. Patience is how you get an outcome. And when it comes to manipulating stories, when it comes to manipulating history, you don't have to force it on a population. You just have to manipulate it long enough and be patient long enough to shift the belief in the stories of those that came before, to create doubt in those that came before, and to seed down the line, the ancestral line, that the reality you exist in now is the best version of reality, even though it might have been better before. Now, this applies more in the example of, totalitarian regimes where people are suppressed and not questioning things. And the idea is they're suppressed because they've been able to take the populations, the people who had the stories, and completely dismiss them and wait for them to pass off. It's one of these things that true dictators understand. You seed and manipulate the information, and then over time, the people with the stories die, and you create these teams against those people, and you create doubts, and you create all this stuff against them to dismiss them. And so as they get older and they die off, or you kill them off and they disappear, you can completely change the reality of people because that generation is gone. 3-generation rule. You just have to wait for that first generation to go to the 3rd generation and die off. And it completely shifts because their experience is no longer valid to those below them. Their kids, their grandparents, or their kids, their grandkids did not go through the experiences they went through. So you could completely wipe World War II, for example, from history simply by waiting for everybody to die off. Think about how powerful that is. Think about that for a second. It is extremely powerful to have this understanding that history can be manipulated simply through patience, of waiting for those ancestors to die off who have the true story of what happened. You can completely shift the world. Completely shift the world in 50 years. Doesn't take long. If the parents were 30 when they had kids, and then they die around the age of 80, 50 years. Shift the world, shift the perspective. So if you can be patient enough, you can do that. If you're worried about your ancestral line carrying on the work that you're doing, you can shift the world and just be patient and understanding of the work you're doing, and that it will shift with that time. But that whole point that I'm making is things can be manipulated very easily when you think of the fact that at your state in life, if you died today, your stories immediately die with you because your perspective is lost, your knowledge is lost, your experience is lost. There are ways to pass it on. You can write books, you can do videos, you can do these other things. But truly, everything dies with you and can be manipulated in the future to change what your experience was, what your perception was, or what even happened through manipulation of the information people are receiving. So it's the 3-generation rule. Grandpa and Grandma knew this happened. They knew World War II happened. But let me ask every one of you today. I'm 37 years old. Let me ask all of you this today. Most of you watching this are probably my age or younger. I seem to have a lot of people that come to me that are in that range. Those of you who are 50s and 60s and up, you'll have more personal experience with this. I myself did not experience anybody who went through World War II. I did, I shouldn't say that, I did. My great-grandparents went through World War II. But I was not young enough to even know the stories, to even remember them. I can barely remember my great-grandmother. My great-grandfather, I have little blips. That's it. No stories, nothing around him. I just know they went through it. And I think he might have been in the military. I don't remember. At this stage in your life, most of us watching this, unless you're up probably 50, 60 in age, I would say, most of us, and let me just segue here for a second. Remember too, as you're going on this journey, age is just a number. Age is not we have this thing around age where it's like, hey, you're 20, you're 70, you're 40. Age is a number, it's not who you are. Always keep that mindset. If you have the mindset of, I am old, that will affect your journey. Have the mindset of, I am me, I am always young, I am always energetic, I am always free, I'm always moving. Have that mindset of positivity around age so that you completely change your reality and the energy around you, so that the energy around you does not create a reality where you are what we would describe as old, elderly, that sort of thing. There are plenty of elderly people in their 90s doing dancing and moving and freely about, who aren't that perception, that negative perception that humans tie to it. Age is a construct of humanity. It is not true. It is not real. It is something that, yes, our bodies change with time, but age is a mental construct. So shift your mind around that. And I felt like saying that because the age came up, and that seems like it's probably a message for a lot of you, especially those who are, 50, 60, 70 and up, that age is a mental construct, and you can regain energy and reframe your reality by understanding that, and understanding age does not define you. But think about this for a second. How many of you watching this actually know people who went through World War II? I bet you the truth of that answer is very few. And I bet you if you did, it was your great grandparents, your grandparents maybe, or your great grandparents. And I'm sure they were all stories. You had a lot of stories. And I'm not talking history books. I'm not talking history books, texts, or videos, or what you see on Netflix. I'm talking how many of you actually know somebody who physically underwent the horrible toll of World War II, of what happened to those people over there, and all of that. Like, how many of you do? I bet you the answer, if you're thinking to yourself about this, is you either don't know anybody, or the person you know is long past, or the stories you know, maybe you remember some of them, but maybe they faded with time. How easy would it be to completely say that war never happened, or that things from 1950 and before never actually happened? How easy would it be to shift that perspective with all of those people gone? It's something I think about a lot. It's something I urge others to think about too. It's a good exercise because it helps you start to look at the world and the information coming out and going, wait, what do I know? It's a way to start reframing how you view the world, start reframing how your brain responds to information. And rather than just accepting it for what it is because somebody told you, because they're an academic, a scientist, a priest, a government official, whatever, it reframes your mind to really ask, what do I know? And could it have been manipulated information? Could this be manipulated? Does this have truth to my experience? What else could be out there? What is another belief that could be valid? Are there people who oppose this idea? And if they oppose it, why do they oppose it? Could they be right? Could I be wrong? And especially when it comes to history. If you study history, and I don't mean history books, be very clear about that. I do not mean history books. A lot of people read history books, and I mean academic books. I'm talking history, straight, the journal entries of others. I'll never forget reading that Aztec book and realizing how manipulated the history we're told of the Spaniards meeting the Aztecs, how manipulated it is, because some of these things they say will completely change your viewpoint of who the Spaniards were, who the Aztecs were, and what actually happened. Like, do you have source information? Do you have journal entries? Do you have witnesses? Do you have stories retold through families over time, oral stories? These are all things we have to ask ourselves, because 3 generations, that's all it takes to wipe out history and change it. And I don't mean wipe out history as in destroy buildings. I mean wipe out history as in to wipe the slate clean. You could burn the books. Right now you could wipe out media. You know, you get an EMP strong enough, you could wipe out tons of the media world, the digital world. Imagine that, if you wiped out the digital world and you burned all the books today. Imagine 50 years from now trying to explain to somebody that we had cell phones capable of recording people who put videos online to teach others, to lift their spiritual awareness and experience this whole realm of other beings. Imagine trying to explain that to somebody in 50 years, if technology was wiped out, if books were wiped out, and if the people who experience this, if the people who are you, essentially, if your kids were trying to explain this to people and the people who really experienced it, us, had died off. You can completely change and manipulate history. That's the whole lesson of today. Question everything. What do I know? And remember, the 3-generation rule just takes 3 generations to wipe out history from a very peaceful standpoint, too. Thank you for watching. Again, all my gratitude to each and every one of you. If you have questions, let me know, and we'll get on to the next lesson.